this week an extended conversation about this sweeping bill with its sponsor, Republican Senator Jerry Cirino. So you wrote a column about your Higher Education Enhancement Act saying that, quote, it ensures free expression on campus and in the classroom at Ohio's public colleges and universities. And you write, our First Amendment is under assault in academia. Senate Bill 83 will fix that. So the idea of ensuring free speech and intellectual diversity, it's vague. It certainly is what most higher education institutions would say they're already doing. So what do you mean by that, and how would you set up standards that would measure if colleges and universities are doing that?
Well, that's a great question. It's difficult to set up firm measurements, certainly, but I can tell you that I've been working on this bill conceptually, certainly in my mind, for almost 2 years. And I've been researching and reading voraciously about what's going on our campuses, particularly in Ohio, but also around the country. And there's no question in my mind that there is a bent at our campus, on our campuses, that is contrary to totally free expression.
How do you do all that? How do you make those measurements?
Well, I think what we can do is follow what many refer to in the Chicago principles, which you may have seen, which really is it's a somewhat old document, but it talks about what should the environment be like in academia today? How do we deliver the best education to our students and prepare them to go out and get jobs so they could pay off their great college debt that they've accumulated? And part of that is that we have to have an openness to all points of view. And that points of view should be debated, discussed, researched. And the job of the professor is to facilitate that activity, because then we are teaching our students how to think, how to analyze, how to respect other people's opinions, even if they disagree with them, and not teaching them what to think. And what we know is happening on many campuses today is that indoctrination is occurring, or attempts to indoctrinate, where professors are attempting to convey their point of view and to inculcate that into the students. And that is not what is behind the First Amendment. And in fact, it's somewhat compelled speech when you think about it, that students are basically told you have to believe this, and whether they believe it or not. And compelled speech is just as egregious as restricted speech.
How do you change that, though? If that's what you're alleging is happening, how do you change that and measure that to ensure that it is changing?
Well, one of the things we're doing in this bill, and we can't absolutely ensure that it happens, these are cultural changes in a sense, but what we have in the bill are engaging the trustees of our universities and community colleges, because they're the governance body, and they set the tone, they set the policies, they hire the president, and make many other important personnel decisions. We're asking them in this bill to step up and make sure that they are not only stating that in their mission statement and in their policies, that diversity of speech is not only to be accepted, it's to be promoted. And we're asking them to do that, and we will be watching that. No hard and fast way to monitor that, except that we will be watching, certainly. And I think what we can do is make sure that we do empower those administrators to be able to defend people's rights to speak with diverse opinions.
You received more than 500 submissions from people who wanted to testify or share written testimony before a hearing last week. That hearing went on for 7 hours, a little bit more than 7 hours. By far, most of what you received was opposing the bill. So I want to ask you about some of the concerns that were raised. First of all, your bill would ban mandatory diversion, equity, and inclusion training. It would still allow colleges and universities to offer that, but ban the mandatory use of that training. Some of those who spoke said they are concerned about a loss of federal funding and accreditation from certain programs like nursing, engineering, business. Is that a concern?
Well, what people there didn't know, and I did state this during the hearing, that timing-wise, it just wasn't coincident with the amendment that we're working on. We've been working on the amendment for almost a month, pretty much since the bill came out. No bill is perfect when it's first introduced. And so we started the process of, after getting some inputs, and we've been working with lots of interested parties to make sure that we have this right, and that we avoided any unintended consequences. Because I know what the spirit of the bill is supposed to be, because I wrote it, okay? And and had help from lots of people, certainly. But one of the things that we're looking to do is to make sure that in the amendment we are making things that are perhaps not as clear as they should have been, making them more clear. We are making some eliminations and we're adding some things. So that's the process that we go through. But the objections of that this would chill academic freedom, chill speech in the classroom, they're all absurd objections. This bill is actually intended to promote the ultimate academic freedom so that anybody can feel free to express themselves. Wherever they are in the political spectrum, they should be able to express themselves. When you talk about the number of people who showed up, of course, when there's a protest of something, the protesters always show up in greater numbers. That's pretty much to be expected. And the vast majority, probably 3/4 of the people who showed up were Ohio State professors or employees. And because they're local, it was easy for them to come here. But what we don't see is the students and the professors who I spoke with personally over the last several months, who perhaps provided some input to me, and certainly perspective, who were afraid to come in and testify. Literally afraid. The night before the hearing, I was trying to persuade one professor who I thought had a phenomenal story. He was afraid of the impact it would have on his career. He was afraid of what his colleagues would think and how he might be ostracized, et cetera. And students felt the same way. I had one student who was graduating in just a couple of weeks, I think. Is graduating in the summer later. Was very afraid. Had a great story. Had some things that people should have heard, but she was afraid that it would impact her graduation and her credits. Nobody should ever feel that way. Anybody should be free to walk around campus and wear either a pro-choice T-shirt or a MAGA hat and not fear for their lives. And we don't have that today on the campuses. And I've had presidents of our universities tell me that they stipulate that it would be a dangerous proposition today.
On the mandatory DEI training, would your amendment get rid of that ban on mandatory DEI training?
No, DEI training is going to be optional. It's not going to be mandatory, nor will we no longer tolerate litmus testing in hiring, and that is going on all around our campuses here. We should be hiring people because of their experience, the quality of their research, if it's an instructional job, or if it's a staff job based on their experience and competencies and so on, not because they agreed to sign a document that affirms their commitment to DEI. That is compelled speech.
How do you prove that somebody did not get a job because of an ideological or political litmus test?
Well, if you look at the ratio right now, as most of the studies have shown, in both faculty as well as staff, it's like a 90-10 relationship. Okay, so I can tell you that they're not out hiring droves of people who are not following the woke agenda, and a lot of the conservatives who would object to that are not even bothering to apply. So we're missing out on some very talented people here, and I'm all for diversity. I think we should have more diversity, but that includes diversity of thought.
Is more diversity woke? What does woke mean to you?
Woke means, we're responding to the things of the day, the concepts of the day. Everybody jumps on board. Look what has happened since George Floyd was killed. A very unfortunate incident, certainly, but that triggered a bunch of things, and all around our society today in America, and we're still living with those. I think we want to promote diversity. I want every child in the state of Ohio who would like an education to be able to get the best education they can get if they want to. We need it for two reasons. We need it, one, because our economy is going to require that we have highly trained people with the right skills to attract companies that are already here, to grow here, or to bring companies that are not here, like Intel. But it's also, on a human side, for individuals. We all know and stipulate that education is your best ticket out of poverty. And that is indisputable. And I want every student to have that. I want them to have the highest quality education. I want them to, when they graduate with $50,000 of student debt in itself is not bad. If it's a good investment, it's okay. but I want them to graduate with the skills that are going to allow them to go out and work in their career and make the most money that they can so that they can pay off their debt. And it'll become a good investment for them.
You have a lot of companies that are requiring DEI training, though. How do you square that if you're not requiring it in college, but the companies that people will be going to?
Yeah, companies are free to do what they want. I'm a former corporate guy, and I understand that, and we don't like government telling us what to do. But I will tell you that in terms of the accreditations and grants and things that you mentioned earlier, that's something we're dealing with in the amendment to make it more clear. We're not going to jeopardize in our ultimate final bill any of these things for the state of Ohio. We certainly don't want to hurt students.
I want to ask you about some of the other things that have been said. Some faculty members have said that the bill could make so many sweeping changes. It could abolish courses on climate change or immigration policy, or it could abolish whole departments such as ethnic studies or gender studies. You've said that that's not the case, and you've said that that's part of the avalanche of misinformation and outright falsehoods about the bill that's come from opponents that you said you were surprised to find out.
Yeah, I mean, everybody looks at something through their own glasses, right? In their own filters. And I don't know where they're coming up with some of that. Perhaps LSD is making a comeback. I'm not sure. But no, those things are just manufactured. You know, we're not trying to, all controversial subjects should be talked about in the classroom. We're not banning anything. We're not restricting speech. This is about more speech. But what we're saying is that when these controversial subjects are being presented, all sides should be presented. And students should be trained and skilled at parsing through the various issues and the various sides of the issues and making up their own mind, instead of having been, being told by a professor, here's what you should think, here's what is settled science. And, I've had discussions with the climate folks. We are, by the way, changing the words in the bill from climate change to climate policies, which arguably, that's really where the debate needs to be right now. There's no sense arguing over whether or not a temperature change in the Earth is real or not. It's measurable. But policies to react to climate change should be up for very important debate.
When you talk about controversial issues, how do you define that? Because what's controversial to somebody may not be to others. There are facts that are established about certain controversial issues. How do you define what that is and say we have to teach the other side of something that really is settled and factual? Right.
When we list those controversial issues in the bill, we have two words that precede them, such as. We're not trying to be all-inclusive here. In 5 years from now, maybe a year from now, who knows? Things change pretty fast. Things will change. What's controversial now may not be later on. And so we use the word such as, and it's meant to be, I don't think anybody would argue, except on a climate change issue. We've had some pushback on that. But don't tell me that abortion is not controversial, right? Parents' rights is controversial right now. So there's a lot of things we didn't include in there, but it was not intended to be all-inclusive.
You also ban relationships and partnerships with China. What does that mean in terms of how it would look on campus? Are Chinese students still welcome here? What about revenue that universities have in partnerships with the Chinese government?
Right. We're working through that part of the amendment right now. In fact, I was discussing that before I came to see you. And so students, it has no impact on students. Admissions is nowhere in the bill. I don't know where everybody saw that in the first place. Chinese students are welcome here, and Ohio State, for example, should continue with whatever policy it decides is best. And they can pay tuition and pay their fees and room and board, et cetera. What we're looking at is making sure that our relationships, whatever they are protecting the assets and intellectual property that may be coming out in research with the university, making sure that national security in the United States is not jeopardized. I think it's pretty well understood and accepted today that China does not have our best interest at heart. Communist China is not our friend. And we don't want to be a closed society here like China used to be in the old days. We do have to be careful and make sure that we are watching out for our best interest, and that's what that section is intended to accomplish.
There's also the concern that the bill would increase administrative costs to comply with the requirements such as posting syllabi online, and that would force more hiring and drive up the costs of higher education.
I don't think it will. I think, by the way, nobody came and asked us from Ohio State if to help fund $14 million that they're spending on DEI with 143 people. So they figured out how to come up with the money to do that out of their operating numbers. So, there might be a couple of things that we turn out that we have to fund, like the training programs that we're going to ask the chancellor to develop for trustees. We are going to provide ultimately dollars for him to do that. But I don't buy the issue that there's a lot of incremental costs involved in meeting the requirements of our bill.
Some of the things that you've expressed in this bill, and you expressed them at the top of the interview, are criticisms that conservatives have had about colleges and universities for a long time, that kids are being indoctrinated, that students with conservative views, their views are being derided, and they're even punished for those views. Right. Does this bill do anything about that? I mean, and how can you? And is that even really true if you talk to other people who say that's not the case?
I believe it is true, and I've been out gathering information since I came to the Senate, and even actually before that. We need to change people's minds and hearts. Ultimately, we can't legislate everything, right? But this is an attempt to get the attention of our university administrators. And I will tell you that after that 7-hour series of hearings last week, I walked away as I was driving my 2.5 hours back to Cleveland. I was thinking about what's my takeaway from this set of hearings. And my takeaway is this. The professors would like to tell the legislators, stay out of our sandbox. Don't tell us what to do or how to do it, but keep sending us billion-dollar checks every year. And by the way, we'd like more because we professors are underpaid. We actually heard that. And I think I told the university presidents this recently. I said, that is an unacceptable viewpoint, and you need to work on that with your faculty, because we do have, as legislators, we do have a seat at the table. We're not just check writers. And we care about Ohio, we care about higher ed, and we're tasked by the people to make sure that our dollars are being spent appropriately, and that's what this bill, one of the things this bill is trying to accomplish.
There are people who are calling this the Higher Education Destruction Act.
Well, they're very creative. I hope they're that creative in teaching their classes. It is the Enhancement Act. This is to enhance higher ed, and it is a course correction for the direction that Ohio education is going in right now that I think is not good. And this course correction is very necessary. If we don't address this sort of thing now, they will go down a woke path that will be perhaps unchangeable in the future.
Are we going to lose potential college professors and even students if this goes forward?
Well, some of the ones that testified last week would be fine with me if they left the way they behaved themselves. But I don't think we're going to see an exodus here, particularly after we redefine some things in the amendment. I think some of them will be comfortable. Professors are probably never going to like the bill really for any reason, but I think they will find it that we've addressed some of the concerns that they have. And again, academic freedom is going to be enhanced. That's why I called it that in the first place. It will be enhanced. There will be no chilling effect on academic freedom.